Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 63 with Tino and Aaron. What's up, Aaron?
Little late night recording here. It's good. How are
That's
you?
right. I'm good, man. Can't complain. Today we're going to chat a little bit about first couple days of the baseball season. We're going to talk a little closers. We both of us took a little different perspective on it, but we'll share some closers that we like, and you'll have some upcoming closers, and I'll have a couple in the top 10 that I think are going to fall out of the top 10 this season. Any coffee stories?
I don't have anything too groundbreaking. I do think as I've been brewing my coffee in the morning as usual. But then I usually have a second coffee and it's brewed at the roastery at the cafe where I work. And I think, I'm just getting really acclimated to that lighter roast profile. Um, and so it's just interesting to feel
It's
my
about time.
preferences.
It's about time. Cheers to that.
Uh, so yeah, to just feel that shift, the fruit tones and the balance and those kinds of things. So yeah, like having more of a response to, you know, like like a Starbucks medium roast. It's just a really different. And I think the other thing was I had an opportunity to taste a coffee, actually a Nordic coffee. I don't know if you've ever heard someone named Tim Wendelboe. You ever
Mhm.
heard of Tim? Evidently, he's also known outside of roasting for some of the work he's done with AeroPress, doing some interesting brew stuff with AeroPress. I don't personally know his work, but I had an opportunity to taste some of his coffee alongside some passenger coffee.
Mhm.
And all of his coffees had kind of a savory, kind of a round note on the finish. But all of our coffees I found to have a little bit more fragrance
Mhm.
and dry fragrance and aroma. So it's just interesting when they picked him because they saw our coffees as being pretty similar,
Mhm.
in terms of a philosophy around like trying to really make roast kind of an invisible part of the flavor and trying to bring forward the natural character of the coffee. So
Sure.
um, yeah, so just some meandering thoughts this week, just about like your palate and um, how you evolve and what you enjoy and things like that. So
Have you ever done a coffee subscription? I ask because obviously I'm here in Walla Walla and there's very limited coffee to buy in-house here. You know, we've got one coffee shop that started as a cart downtown, and he sources from roasters from around the area, Spokane and Portland and Seattle and whatnot. But I was thinking about, I love the roastery here and they do a really good job, but they roast the same stuff over and over again. Have you ever subscribed to any sort of coffee subscription? And do you know anything about it?
yeah, the one subscription Laura and I did Angel's Cup for a while.
Oh, that's right.
Um, and so we would get like a flight of five or six coffees.
Hmm.
Um, we were on a biweekly. It was too much, started switching to monthly. But yeah, we that's the subscription service I've had experience with, and that wasn't like bags of coffee. It was like more like a 50, 60 gram sample.
Sure.
So you like brew one pot, or we would do like little cuppings with it. Um, and yeah, they were all from different roasters. There was nothing, it wasn't, totally random, from across the states and things.
Right. Cool. That's awesome. I am considering it. Like I said, I think I very much enjoyed the Walla Walla Roastery coffee, especially the Guatemala El Injerto, because like I said before, I found that that's kind of my favorite coffee for quite a while, and they continue to have it. But I do want to branch out and try some new stuff, and I'd be very excited to do that. So I might have to look into that. All right, just take a few minutes, and what are your initial reactions to baseball being back? You can go player specific. I've got some more kind of broader sorts of perspective, but what are your first couple thoughts that come to mind when we talk about the first weekend or so of baseball?
The first thought I wrote down, it's been my biggest overarching experience from this week has been the Guardians Mariners series.
Uh-huh.
Because that was a series that I was as soon as I saw it on the calendar late last weekend, I got really excited for it. And all those games have started after I went to bed, and I've watched every single one in the morning.
Uh-huh.
Um, and through the first three games, I have not seen today's game, nor have I read. Nor do I know the outcome. But the first three games, that's kind of been my baseball like focus the first 3 days.
Mm.
Outside of watching Otani's game, that's the games I've watched, and I've just been really connected to those teams. I love each of their respective styles. I like Scott Service. He's over there chewing on leather, and Francona sitting over there eating sunflower seeds or whatever the hell he's noshing on all the time.
Right.
I like both managers. They both have superstar hitters and Ramirez and Julio, and they both have pitchers. They both have bullpens. They both play really good defense. I just love watching the two of those teams play. So that's been the highlight and kind of the overarching takeaway for me is just how much I've enjoyed consuming that series and that matchup.
Awesome. Obviously, I've watched those games as well. I think Julio's better. I think he's even better this year. I think his walk rate's going to be around 6%, and that can get ugly at times when you don't walk much at all. But I just, man, he's going 2 for 4 every game. Yeah, interesting series. I won't ruin the last game for you. I think matchup of 285 to like 92 win teams looks like to me. Very evenly matched, as you said. So I have a couple of broad takeaways. I have watched quite a few condensed games on MLB TV, and so I have a couple of bullet points here. One is just the big one is we're back to the old baseball. I think that putting the ball in play is going to be of more importance. We've got a ton of stolen bases. The pace is a lot faster. We're seeing, a lot of defense. We're seeing ground balls be base hits, which we just didn't see for the last like 5 years, right? Tons of ground balls that are base hits. It puts an emphasis in my mind on um, when we're looking at pitchers for fantasy, like looking for fly ball pitchers could be a thing, right? Looking for strikeouts obviously was going to be even more important because a lot of these grounders that were outs a couple of years ago are not going to be outs anymore. Contact is more important than ever. Strikeouts are more important. I also think that the pace of the game has really changed my consumption. Whereas, and I know a lot of people have said this, I used to have baseball in the background, right? It would drone on, and I loved that part of it. And it was a part of my day and a part of my night. And now it's more like watching a football game. You have to sit down and really focus because the games are moving so quickly. I just was going to pull up the ESPN game to watch while we were having our podcast, and it's over, right? It's 2 hours and 45 minutes. And so I would expect it to be over, but it's over. So that's kind of crazy. I also think that the
I
W
have noticed that. I have noticed that. Um, it doesn't feel rushed to me, but in terms of just the pitching, the pace of the movement is quicker.
it's really different.
Um,
I would
yeah,
say too that one thing that I really, really love is I think both the clock and how intense the WBC was has changed baseball culture a lot, right? I think they're trying to add pace, and when you add pace and you change rules, you're taking away the power or the agency of the people that held on to the unwritten rules because you're saying, no, actually, we're going to change it, right? And the WBC and the celebratory nature of it and the energy and the fact that it felt like a Final Four or, like an AFC championship football game or something like that, and not just another game in 162 games, I think it's changed people's perspective, right? And it's flipped a lot of those rules on their head and said this isn't actually what people want. And baseball, Major League Baseball has to pay attention to it. Despite Rob Manfred's comments recently about analytics, which were horrible. Did you see that, by the way?
no, I did not.
he said one of the owners basically said that, well, I don't want to quote it without being spot on. It was just, but it was really putting down the importance of analytics. I'm like, dude, that should not be our commissioner. Anyways, those are my biggest takeaways, is that the game has changed. And the game has
Yeah.
changed in such a wonderful way, in my opinion. The pace, the consumption, ground balls for base hits, the number of steals, right? That might impact my team in that I have these guys that steal bags, and now are they as important because everyone else is stealing bases? I look up and Volpe's got to steal, and Acuna's got to steal, and Semyon's got to steal, and you're just like, whoa, stolen bases are totally back. We could see someone with 70 stolen bases this year. I think that's pretty darn realistic. So I don't know. I love it. I'm on a high as far as what baseball has looked like thus far. Um, I think it's super cool. I think it's super cool. I've been wishing for baseball uh to be a little bit less three true outcome for quite a while. And I feel like they've succeeded in doing that.
I laughed to myself was the first game I took in was the Giants and the Yankees. And I was on the radio
Mhm.
on MLB at bat and at work in the afternoon. I was finishing my work day, and both Webb and Cole had like 10 strikeouts through
Mhm.
4 innings, and it was like, and the only run was the Aaron Judge home run. And it was like all strikeouts, and
Right.
I was like, man, this is supposed to be the year that baseball changed. Like it's still three true outcomes. But to your point, clearly the game that was a cold day, and those two guys were dealing. But I definitely noticed. I did feel like it has gotten a little bit rote. Like every time I turn on a broadcast, like the broadcasts are talking about here are the new rules and here are the bigger
Right.
bases, and then you
Right.
goes to a commercial on MLB MLB their streaming service goes to commercial, and there's like the MLB short about explaining new rules, and
Right.
it's like you're being hit over the head constantly with
Well,
explaining the new rules.
I
And
think
but I mean, I do think it's good that they're doing it. Yeah, when you consume a lot of baseball, it's like, okay,
right. I think they want
I know,
people,
I get
they
it.
just want people to know that they're trying to change. I assume
Yeah,
that's why. That game, by the way, Webb gave up 4 runs, but and I did a little write up both on the blog and on Twitter about what his stuff looked like, but he had increased velocity, increased movement, and I think that was the difference between him giving up ground balls and him actually striking people out. He looked phenomenal.
yeah.
Not quite as good as Luis Castillo, but he looked phenomenal. Castillo looked great. So I did pull the quote real quick. Manfred said, once everybody's doing it, he's talking about analytics. He said once everybody's doing it, that little margin that maybe you're getting, I'm sure that whatever that margin was at one point in time, whatever it is today, it sure as heck is not worth the damage that was done to the game over a period of time. And he was agreeing with another owner or with an owner who said that. And everyone's speculating that it's the Colorado owner that said it because Colorado is such
Probably.
a stupid franchise. But I couldn't believe that he would be so tone deaf. He said he agrees with an MLB owner that told him analytics is an arm race to nowhere.
Hmm.
It's just crazy to me. All you need to do is
Well, it's yeah.
look at Tampa Bay, you look at Cleveland, you look at LA, not the Angels, you look at Houston, Seattle. It's not as if they're not scouting, but like analytics, they're analytics heavy franchises, and they're the ones that win. I know I'm preaching to the choir. It's just so stupid to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
He makes me
It's an
crazy.
oversimplification of what analytics means, and just like it's like, oh, it means shifting, and they, no, it's more than that. It's
Well,
looking at trends and player analysis and integrating like what types of players you look for, and then what how do they fit what you teach, and then matching those up with the right development. Like there's and then style of play as an element of that.
right.
But there's it's not when you just boil it down to those sort of tangential strategical elements. It's an oversimplification. It loses its like
Totally.
truth.
Totally. I also think
So
there's, we've said this for a long time, but it's you have to marry the two, right? And David Cohn, actually, I think it was David Cohn that said it on Sunday Night Baseball earlier tonight really well, which was you've got to have front offices now are looking for diversity in opinion, right? You have to have um, analytics heavy folks and scouts together because I think if you are exclusively one way, you won't win, right? You've got to lay eyes on a player to understand what the stats mean, and you've got to understand the stats to understand who the player is because Elijah Green looks great, and I love Elijah Green, but Elijah Green isn't necessarily going to be a good major leaguer until he has even a 45 hit tool, right? But you don't know that looking at Elijah Green. You watch Elijah Green swing a bat and you say he's going to be the next superstar until you start to examine what he's actually done. So I don't know. I found that quote offensive. I think Rob Manfred should both keep his mouth shut and quit because I just think he's terrible for baseball.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I also think I think it's been impressive to me. Again, I've been fortunate to see in the Guardians and Mariners to see so many good pitchers, and then also watching Ohtani start. You know, the notion that these guys were gonna have trouble adjusting to the pitch clock, and like how are these guys gonna? Oh, this person was the slowest. To watch like Ohtani pitch, like he wasn't spaced at all. It didn't change it. No, if anything, gives him more of an advantage.
Right.
And same thing with Castillo. I mean, those guys are, it's almost like they're dictating. I feel like I was watching a full court press on basketball.
Right.
Like they were just like the pressure that they're putting on the batter. Like, no, you got to get back in the box. Here it comes again.
Right.
It just, the exact opposite narrative I've heard of like how are these guys that are slow going to adjust, especially the guys at the highest level.
Right.
It's been
Well,
pretty awesome to see them answer that resoundingly. Like, that's not an issue.
I wonder,
Uh,
like, they're used to throwing the ball. And I don't think that the highest end guys needed the full like span of time to power back up to do it. I think pitchers like Ohtani and Castillo could throw mid to high 90s in their sleep over and over again because that's just how they're built, right? I do think that some of the relievers that we saw pop could struggle a bit at times because they were the ones that really had to muscle up and recuperate in order to do it. But one
That's a
interesting,
good point. We've seen a lot of bad relieving results so far. It's a good point.
when I did a write up on three pitchers from the weekend. I did from Friday, Webb, Castillo against the Guardians, and who's the third? Oh, Corbin Burns. And one of the things that I found with Castillo that was fascinating was he threw fastball or sinker, both of which were 95 plus average, uh, 59% of the time total. So I wonder if some of these guys are just gonna, if they're gripping and firing, if you um, we might see more like them leaning on velocity a little more, because it might be harder for hitters to adjust to that kind of velocity coming at them more rapidly. I don't know, that's a stab in the dark, but I was taken aback by the number of fastballs and sinkers Castillo threw. It could be too that he throws a heavy fastball and a heavy sinker, and he's in Seattle in late March where it's cold, and he just said, you know what, they're not going to hit this. It's not going to be fun for them. Um, but
My
yeah,
last takeaway is completely off topic. Is
mhm.
the new Twins uniforms are sick.
You like them?
Oh my God! I turned the last few innings on of the Royals and Twins. It was a 2-0 game, and I thought I might see Duran pitch. And these are two teams I haven't seen yet. I know I don't have any players fantasy wise from those teams.
Right.
I just want something on that I didn't have an emotional investment in that have players I wanted to see. I got to see Melendez hit, and that was cool. But I saw the Twins uniforms, and I was like, those are awesome.
That's cool.
They look, and their hats as well.
Mhm.
Like they did an amazing job. The color and design, like it's a sick uniform.
I
I
like
loved
them.
them.
I like them.
These were the dark blue ones, not the road the whites,
Right.
but they were. It was. I was taken aback how much I liked them.
I like him better
completely.
than the old ones. Um, what I uniform wise, what I loved was the Royals were wearing all baby blue.
Hmm.
I thought that was pretty cool. Um, all right. I have so much more to talk about as far as the weekend, but we'll let that go. Just happy that baseball's back. Uh, so we don't have to spend too much time on relievers. What we were trying to do really is identify the relievers that we feel like have staying power and those that, for me, those that don't, and for you, those that might be on the upswing. As we all know, relievers are extremely volatile. I think part of our TGFBI strategy in not picking established relievers at cost was that we found that about a third of the relievers who are ranked in as the number one reliever on their team or in the top 30 heading into 2022, only a third remained the next season. That's how volatile that position is. So we felt like this exercise was one that made sense given our strategy and given kind of what we see in the volatility of relievers and the price that people specifically in redrafts are willing to pay for top relievers. To me, it's insane. For people who are so analytical, it's insane that people are willing to pay that kind of price. I took my top 10 relievers heading into 23 based on the Fantrax staff consensus list. And did you use that list as well?
Yes, I did.
Sweet. So who we have on this list, and then I added one more at the end because Edwin Diaz is hurt, is Edwin Diaz at 1, Emmanuel Clase at 2, Josh Hader, Jordan Romano, Devin Williams, Ryan Presley, Raisel Iglesias, Felix Bautista, Ryan Hensley, Camilo Doval, and then Clay Holmes is 11. Uh, who are your 3 that you feel are going to be on this list heading into 2024?
The three that I'm most confident in, the first one is easy and it's the low-hanging fruit. It's Class A.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that I have the most confidence in. The other two, for me, well, here, who would be your number one before I give my number two and
Just
three?
Class A. I think so. We can spend a minute on him. He signed a deal, 5-year deal through 2026 for $4 million a year. Barring injury, he's so dominant. I think he's interesting because he's not your typical like 30% plus strikeout type of closer, but his cutter is just watch him, right? That cutter is unhittable. It's a better pitch than Mariano Rivera's cutter, like from a pitch quality standpoint. He doesn't have to throw any other pitches, but his slider happens to be 92 miles an hour and happens to had a whiff rate last year of 42.7%. But it's just all weak contact with that cutter. 0.73 whip last year, 3 and 4, 42 saves, 1.36 ERA, 3.7% walk rate. So he doesn't walk anybody either. He's as dominant as they come as a reliever. He's, I think, under the radar a bit, which is interesting, but you really can't pick at his game other than maybe he has the stuff to get more strikeouts and he's choosing not to, but who cares at this point, right? He's the number one closer, especially with Diaz going down.
Yeah.
Anything to add with him?
Yeah, I think for me, it's his location and command
Mm-hmm.
that really separates him. His swinging strike rate is almost 17%, which is still elite. It's not up with the top of this position, however, but his walk rate, projected walk rate for this year is 5%, and his location plus is really outstanding for a reliever. There's that old saying of like reliever level command, right? If a starter is on the twinges of being a reliever, well, usually it's command, and that's the reason they are relievers. If they
Right,
could command, they would be a starter,
right.
because they're more valuable that way. However, to me, Class A is a Class A example, best example of why command is so important. And really, to me, it's a stabilizer. On top of his immense skills in terms of his velocity and pitch mix.
Yeah. He's just watching him in against the Mariners. It's just he comes in the game and you just know, right? You're just
Yeah.
okay, game's over. And
Yeah.
those guys are fun. I think those guys are super, they're fun, they're interesting, they're scary. You want them on your team. Do you remember the trade for Emmanuel Clase by chance?
I do. I know that it involved Kluber, and I think there may have been other pieces, but I know what I remember is that Kluber went to the Rangers and Clase went to the Guardians.
It was Clase and Delano DeShields Jr. Um,
Okay.
but all
I
Clase
thought there might be another.
at the time he was just like another 100 mile an hour arm. Um, but yeah, you're right. What separates him truly is his command. You feel like he can really do whatever he wants on the mound with the cutter, and that's pretty cool. He had a run value of -11 on the cutter and -10 on the slider last year, and he only threw 72 innings. So that's not easy to do. Um, who is your second 2024 top 10 closer off this list?
Yeah, so my second most confident returnee to this top 10 is going to sound a little odd, but I'll talk about why, and it's Raisel Iglesias. Um, right now he's nursing a tender shoulder, so again sounds odd, but the premise of this list is who will be 2024 top 10, who will repeat by the end of the year. I believe he'll perform to the point where he'll be right squarely back in the top 10. Like Class A, his location plus and walk rate is um, elite. His location plus is comparable to Class A, and as is his walk rate. Um, and like Class A, his swinging strike rates in that 16.5, 17% range. I think with Raisel, because he's been on the Angels and then he split season last year on the Braves. Um, we've kind of forget he had 4 straight years of over 30 saves, or 4 in 5. The only year he did not was in 2020, which of course we know doesn't count. But from 2018 through 2021, and then in 2017 he had 28. But every other he was over 30. And the Braves have consistently been a bullpen that for fantasy produces consistent results in terms of holds and saves. So I think with his command, with his track record, he's only 33. Seeing guys like Kenley Jansen and Ryan Presley, hold down and be very stable and at ages even past 33. So to me, when I look at an exercise of safety, stability, skill set carrying over from year to year, and also that team context, a team that prefers a traditional hierarchy and structure to the closer, consistently produces fantasy results. I think again his bat stock is down because coming out of the Angels, time with the Angels, I think this year on the Braves is going to reestablish him, and he will be my second most confident to be in the top 10.
He's on my no list.
Nice.
So
There you
for
go.
me, I do not believe he will be a top 10 closer heading into 24. Um, First red flag for me is he's on the IL right now with shoulder inflammation. I think that's never good, obviously. His velocity was down last year. His four seam fastball on average was down 1.3 miles an hour. His slider was down 1 mile an hour. His change was down, less than like 0.7 miles an hour, and his sinker was down 1.9 miles an hour. So his fastball velocity was the lowest since 2016. His whiff rates were down versus 21. His contract says that he's a closer, but he's got decreasing velocity. He's got decreasing whiff rates. He's injured coming into the season. And it is of interest to me that when they traded for him, they put him in the setup role and they put Jansen as the closer, right? Doesn't mean that they think Iglesias is a setup guy. It's just that they valued Jensen over him, or they wanted him in that higher leverage role, right? The other thing is, this is going to sound silly, but Joe Jimenez and Kirby Yates are also on that team. And Jimenez was a pretty bad closer for the Tigers, but Kirby Yates had a year where he was probably the most dominant closer in baseball. I don't know, how much of like barbecue chicken his Kirby Yates arm is at this point, given his injuries, but I don't see the same stranglehold on the closer role with Iglesias as some of the others, and I see a 33-year-old with the shoulder injury with decreased velocity over the last year and lower whiff rates. So for me, it's not to say that he's not going to be a decent closer or an effective closer. Um, it could be that he holds on to the job, does a decent job, and is still ranked outside of the top 10 going into 24. The one thing, like I said, he does have in his favor is the fact that he signed to a pretty big contract, and it's, teams do pay attention to that when assigning roles. But he is on my not in the top 10 heading into 24 list. All right.
I love it.
My second pitcher, who I think is going to be on in the top 10 heading into 24, is predictably because he's on my team. Not really. That's not why I have him here. I have him here because I believe his skills. Is Felix Bautista, the closer for the Orioles, 27 years old. Last year, had 15 saves, 88 strikeouts in 65 and 2/3 innings, a .93 WHIP. He did walk 9.1% of the batters he faced, and he struck out 34.8%. 99-mile-an-hour fastball, 24% whiff rate on the fastball, negative 14 run value. His splitter is the pitch that I think is the one that separates him from others. It has an over 10-mile-an-hour difference between the splitter and the four seam. He surrendered an 0.87 average and a 185 slug against the splitter last year. He threw it 26% of the time, and he got a 53.3% whiff rate, which is nuts. He also throws a slider that he threw 12% of the time last year. He gave up a high average and a high slug, but he also got a 42.5% whiff rate. So you're talking about a pitcher who is almost 10% above league average as far as whiff goes. He's got 2 pitches over a 42% whiff rate last year. He's in his prime. He's 27 years old. This is a really silly minor thing, but I don't know if you remember, Baltimore created this huge entrance for Felix Bautista when he comes into games at Camden Yards. And I think it's based on a character in The Wire, which was a series that was based in the Baltimore area. And so there's all this persona around his entrance. And I feel like when you look at Edwin Diaz was lights out last year. We all know that. Would the pressure have been there to sign him to a 5-year, $100 million deal without the hoopla around who Edwin Diaz is and what he represented to the fans in New York? I think that carries value at times. It's not something that I'm going to solely base fantasy decisions on, but I think Baltimore wants Bautista to be their closer, right? He's a huge dude. He throws 100-mile-an-hour gas. He's intimidating. He's got the nasty split. I think it's his job to hold on to for a long time. I also looked through the Baltimore organization as far as who could replace him as the closer. And there's really no one outside of DL Hall. And I don't think DL Hall, if he's not a starter, is going to be a closer right off the bat. I think if DL Hall is a reliever, he becomes more of a multi-inning reliever, a fireman, and teams tend to kind of stay away from the left-handed closers because of the matchups at the end of the game. So Felix Bautista is my second, I guess, lock to be a top 10 reliever heading into 2024.
Interesting.
You got any thoughts on Bautista?
He's fun. Yeah, it's interesting. We were separated on Iglesias due to health, and I know that for me, Bautista has battled some stuff in spring, both was an ankle or foot he had surgery on, and then his shoulder was barking.
Yeah, but he's pitching
definitely
right now,
interesting.
man.
Yeah, he is.
That's the difference,
sure.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I have questions. You can't argue with skills, right? His stuff plus and all that stuff is through the roof. His K minus BB last year was almost 26%. Yeah, I just wonder, only done it once, and like, will we see it again? And is he going to stay healthy? And then the command is reliever level command, right? So I think he's as good as bad as any in this group. You can't if you need to bet on swinging strike rate and stuff, right? It's a great indicator who's going to get those opportunities. And like I love that you looked at the pipeline to see. But in
Mhm.
fairness, this time last year, no one was thinking he would be a closer either. These
Not at
these
all.
guys tend to
That's
these guys do tend to come out of nowhere, but that doesn't mean they can't stay at least for a few
that's
years,
why
right?
we're doing the exercise.
Yeah, they burn bright and burn fast. So
Yep. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with a couple more.
I just saw that terrain.
No, it's crazy. It's crazy. Sorry, we just
I
looked at
saw that terrain bid. Yeah,
our NFBC Fab results for the week were a little bit nuts, um, or a lot nuts.
price terrain much.
I will say one more thing with Bautista. Well, two more things. The first is to your injury point. I was very much glued to his velocity in his first two outings in 2023, just to make sure that he was moving past the injury. I also find it interesting that in two outings, he has another zero point 0.2 inches on his, or excuse me, 0.2 feet on his extension on his fastball and 0.3 on the split finger. And so I wonder if he's made an attempt to try to get a little more extension given his size, which would make him that much more scary if he can continue to be effective with those pitches. All right. So your next, I guess your third relief pitcher in the top 10 here that you believe is going to be on the list in 2024.
Man, I really struggled with this. I really punched holes in every other single person when I had very little confidence. I could make up a reason pretty easily of why they wouldn't be.
Sure.
But for the exercise, not wanting to cop out, I made Devin Williams my number three.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he follows the Edwin Diaz type model more than the Class A, in that he has swinging strike rates that are third at the position, and zone contact is fourth best at the position. So, tons of swing and miss, gets so much miss. Edwin was, in his own tier there. He has swinging strike rate was 25%, and his zone contact was under 70%, which is just absurd.
Right.
Devin Williams is in 74% and almost 18.5% swinging strike, but he represents that type of model. The things that give me concern with Devin is command. Um, Also the fact that Milwaukee has a lot of relievers I really like in the pipeline. Um, I don't necessarily think they'll trade him because he's under arbitration for 3 more years, but they also, if he does get saves, his arbitration number goes up. I worry about potential injury with him throwing that changeup so much. Um,
The pronated wrist.
so yes,
Mhm.
yeah, but I love him as a pitcher. And so again, as I looked at this list and like what skills are you going to bet on? Um, I would bet that he holds the role through the whole year, make him my number three.
Okay.
But I just had honestly a really hard time with this group.
So I will not push back, but I don't look at command nearly as much with relievers. I do if they aren't throwing 100 miles an hour or if they don't have some sort of double plus pitch. But I don't know that for relievers, it's to me, it's as important as it is with starters. Starters, I think command is what takes you to the top, right? And without
Yes,
very hard to be a dominant starter without command. It's the separator. With relievers, I think
right,
there are plenty of dominant relievers who need two pitches and they don't need to spot every pitch, right? Because they are throwing so freaking hard, or they're throwing the Devin Williams airbender that is just, it's an unhittable pitch damn near, right? Felix Bautista's splitter doesn't matter if he commands it that well because it's such a dominant pitch with so much movement. Um,
right.
that's not
No,
to
I
say that
I
you don't
think
want to spot your pitch. It's just to say that it's something that is not a deal breaker for me when it comes to picking a reliever.
no, I think you're 100% right, and I agree with you in terms of assessing relievers in that fashion. I think the reason why I'm emphasizing it for this exercise, is because I was looking at it in terms of a source of volatility, right?
Absolutely.
Someone having a bad year or something like that, what would be the root of it?
Yep.
At this level in the top 10, I think I was looking for that part of their profile as something that would offer more maybe potentially stability for their other skills.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, to your point, that doesn't mean that they're not good relievers, so they wouldn't be in the top 10, right? It's just, I was trying to look at that as an indicator because of how well Diaz and Clase did
Right.
in that.
Right.
They have above average command, with the elite swinging strike rate, and that's what really puts them in the upper tier and
Right,
gets them coming back on this list year after year. So, but yeah, you're 100% right about the command. Um, the stuff needs to be overwhelming first and foremost, and you need to avoid contact. You can't have traffic on the bases.
right. All right, my third going totally, I don't know. This was the third one was hard for me too. This is a gut feel thing. My third is Camilo Doval. I will grant people the 1.24 whip. I'll grant them the 10.5% walk rate, the sub 30% K rate. Um, but there are other things that the other concern might be that he's such a ground ball heavy pitcher. And we just talked about how baseball is more exciting because more grounders for hits and whatnot. But I think his stuff is dominant. And I think part of the reason why he hasn't been quite as effective as some of the others on this list is kind of like you, Darvish, right? They both throw a cutter that's a fun cutter to watch, and it's not an effective pitch. Darvish throws it for variety's sake, but it gets lit up. And the same thing with Doval. So his slider that he throws 43.6% of the time in 2022 surrendered a 158 average and a 226 slug and had a whiff rate of 38.7% and a run value of negative 17. Okay. Sinker, which he threw 25% of the time, 242 average, 274 slug. His cutter, which is his hardest pitch at 99.4, that he threw 30.5% of the time, surrendered a 340 average and a 604 slug for a run value of positive 6. Okay. So to me, when I look at him, I would say, like, why are you even throwing the cutter, right? Either teach him how to grip a four seam or have him be sinker slider. You don't know if the pitch is going to go left or right. And leave it at that. Why are you throwing that third pitch as a dominant reliever? So what I have in my notes is he should be locked in as the closer. They don't have a lot, just like Bautista, they don't have a ton coming up in their bullpen that I can see. I think tweaks are needed in his pitch mix to make him as effective as he needs to be, but I have confidence that the Giants, if anybody, could figure that out. I think the cutter needs to be nixed. But there's no real threat apparent other than maybe Taylor Rogers, and who hasn't been a totally effective closer. We had conversations about him last year. Um, and that ground ball heavy closers can be risky, but I think his stuff is so dominant, and a simple tweak could elevate his K rate a ton, in my opinion. So young player, um, organization without someone to kind of backfill him, somebody who throws 100 miles an hour. And I think his effectiveness is not about skill set as much as it is pitch mix. And I have confidence that the Giants will change that. Um, am I 100% confident in Doval on the top 10 going into 24? No, but I do think he has tremendous upside to go from where he is, and he's already in this top 10 list.
I like it.
I'm going to mention a couple real quickly, a couple that I had on my no list. And then we can move to a couple that you have on your list as ascending, and then we'll get out of here. I have Ryan Presley on my no list, meaning not in the top 10 next year. He's 34. He signed a 2-year, $30 million contract heading into this season. His salary says closer, but his velocity was down in 22 versus 21. Like I said, he's 34. I think both Montero, Abreu, and Neris can all close on that team if he was to falter at all. And he's had minor injuries since 2019. So I'm betting on health and age as much as anything with Ryan Presley. I'm not super confident he's not going to be on this list, but I don't love him either. And I could see Houston going in a different direction. They're also so cutthroat that I don't think they're gonna care if he slips slightly. They're not going to care about replacing him. And then my other one is surprisingly is Ryan Helsley. So Helsley's 28. He obviously closes for the Cardinals. He went 9-1 with 19 saves and a 1.25 ERA. He had 94 Ks in 64 2/3 innings, a .74 WHIP, 8.4% walk rate, 39.3% K rate. So K minus BB of over 30%. So you ask, how the heck is he not on the list next year? 185 BABIP, okay, which I fully expect to regress at least, somewhat to the mean, which means even if it's a 240 BABIP instead of 185, he's given up a lot more hits. You know what his left on base percentage is? Now, left on base is not purely luck, right? Left on base is also a product of striking people out and surrendering weak contact. I grant that.
Right.
Any idea what his left on base percentage was last year? Just off the top of your head.
88%.
93.4%, which to me means there was an element of luck involved with his left on base percentage as well. So you've got an abnormally high left on base percentage, an abnormally low BABIP. And then, his pitches were awesome. We all know he has the 100-mile-an-hour gas. He's got the 89-mile-an-hour slider. He's got the whiff rate that's 13% above league average. But prior to 22, he had never had a K minus BB above 13.1%. So something happened to him going into last year. He had never had a whip below 1.25, and his K rate was never above 22.8%. I don't know I'm not saying that's the pitcher who he is. I'm not saying that who he was last year from a stuff standpoint isn't who he is going to be moving forward. But we saw a 2.2 mile an hour jump in his average velocity. And we saw a swinging strike rate go from 11.4% in 21 to 18.3% in 22, right? So we had these huge performance jumps. And then we had the batted ball luck as well. So the last thing that I guess maybe the biggest thing that gives me pause with Helsley is he's got Giovanni Gallegos behind him, right, who was closed before. He's got Jordan Hicks behind him throwing 105 miles an hour. And he has Guillermo Zuniga, who pitched in the WBC, who was also absolutely dominant throwing triple digits. So the Cardinals are growing these Helsley type guys. And I think there are people behind him to close if he falters at all. And for me, looking at the BABIP, the left on base percentage, and the lack of history, not even the lack of history, but the negative history during previous years, I don't think his hold on the job is tight. I think if he comes out and shoves again, then that's great. More power to him. But I would not draft him in a keeper league or have him in a keeper league and expect him to be the Cardinals closer for the next 3 years. Any thoughts on Helsley?
Yeah, he was routinely seen or talked about as one of the last quote unquote safe closers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a term like an anchor to your bullpen or your sort of the linchpin. I think it's a mistake to view him that way. The Cardinals don't use him that way. They
Right.
will use Gallegos. So to me, if you're gonna pay a premium in a redraft league to acquire someone like Helsley, who's he's in a timeshare just like Duran is, just like Munoz and Seawald. He's
Yep.
in a timeshare, and like you said, as good a year as he had last year, there were some markers, and I think to me I kept worrying he was going to break. Yes, the velocity is impressive. It's fun to watch, but um, he has a track record of a lot of injuries, and he's throwing really, really hard all the time. So,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that's why they don't use him on back-to-back days. They have said we're going to manage him, so we do not use him on back-to-back days.
Right.
And usually, that's a prerequisite to having that capital C closer role, is you have to have the ability to do that.
I agree. All right. Why don't you give me one or two of your up and coming guys that you really believe in, you think that will be on this list heading into 24?
I sure will. Because these guys are on my roster, so I did not hold. And I say on my roster, I'm talking about in our home league,
Uh-huh.
our home league. So that's not a coincidence. I didn't keep a closer. However, I did target players who I believe may ascend into that role.
Mm-hmm.
In hopes that I will have closers at the end of the year, and that work will continue. So I'm sure you'll point that out, and I just want to be obvious or upfront. It's not a coincidence. The first one to me is P. Fairbanks. So, uh, you know, he is all the markers are there. Not dissimilar from Helsley. He's hit trouble staying healthy, I would not say he's has an egregious record as Helsley does, but he has had injuries, as you know many relievers do.
Hasn't he had
From
two
his,
Johns?
I know he's had one at some point in his career coming up through Texas. I don't think he's had one since he's been at Tampa. But his skills are off the charts. He's the only one that's even close to Edwin Diaz in terms of zone contact. He's at 71% last year.
Mm-hmm.
And his swinging strike was at 17%. Really, really locates it very well as well. His K minus BB last year was 40% last year. He got rewarded with a contract from Tampa last year, which would alleviate some of the concerns around arbitration and saves.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe he's going to have 35 or 40 saves this year. However, um, if he has 20 or 25, once you get past the first 6 or 7 with the kind of skills potentially that he has, I, I, I can foresee him being in the top 10 going into 2024. I care less about the saves in our league because we also count holds. So I think he'll have 35 saves plus holds, but we'll see. But so he's one of my risers, and the other one is Michael King for the Yankees. I don't believe in Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes has a pretty bad splits versus left-handed um, uh, hitters. He also has a pretty strong ground ball lead and a lower swing strike rate than
Mm-hmm.
you'd like to see from a closer. So he relies on ground ball contact. He can run hot. You know, he had a really good streak last year. He is a good pitcher. Once they got him from Pittsburgh, they changed his arsenal and he really got very good. I think he's a good reliever, but I think there's enough holes there that he's not going to be the closer. And I can foresee someone in that pen stepping up and taking that role. I think Boone likes to have a closer. Um, you know, it's one of the things I look for in a situation like this is where does the team context, where does the manager preference? I mean,
Sure.
I think you have teams like the Dodgers, the Twins, the Mariners are very comfortable having a fluid matchups. There are
Mm-hmm.
other teams that say they want to do that, but you can also see that the manager prefers to go to the same guy,
Yeah.
like so um, I think Boone prefers to go to the same guy. It makes it easier for him to do his job. I don't think he likes answering the question. So I'm not saying Michael King will, but I think Michael King, I would bet that he has the skills. His K by SPB last year was 25%, sub 80% zone contact. He was a beast for them in the middle innings, and I can just see him continuing to move up the ladder
Mm-hmm.
as if Holmes starts to hit some bumps in the road and potentially end the year as the closer in the playoffs. And I think if that happens, his the way he'll be valued in 2024 would be in the top 10.
Sure.
So
One note for me with the Yankees is just that they're overflowing with huge arms, right? That are fastball sweeper. That's just they're able to develop that. And like I look down their list of relievers, and you've got Loizaga, you've got Marinaccio, who I think is great. His changeup is phenomenal. You've got even Jimmy Cordero, right, who's got $1 million arm, but can't really hit the broadside of a barn. Um, it's true. They have these guys who throw gas, and I even see our boy Art Warren is on the team. He's injured, but he's
yeah,
on.
are you?
He's
I
in the
didn't know that.
organization. He's in the organization. Um,
Shout out to 2022 draft and hold team.
oh my goodness. So yeah, I think that I like his skills. I agree with you with Holmes. I do think they'll stick with Holmes. I also don't think the Yankees are afraid of ground ball heavy relievers, right? That's what Loizaga is too. Uh, but also Clay Holmes, I think has a sweeper this year that he didn't have previously. I think I remember hearing that on one of the podcasts. So I don't know. I think King has as much of a chance as any in that regard. Um, as far as who was the other one you mentioned? Oh,
Pete,
Fairbanks.
crazy eye Pete.
I just think Fairbanks is gonna get hurt. I hate to say that, and I'm not saying that because he's your guy. I'm saying that because, you know,
Because of history.
yeah, his track record says it. He's 29,
Yeah.
and the most innings he's pitched in a major league season is 42.2 innings, right? And so I see the same crazy swing and miss numbers that you do, right? I see the absolutely dominant stuff. You look at Stuff Plus, you look at swinging strike rates, you look at all that stuff, and he's so far head and shoulders above everybody else in so many ways. I think he's like as good of a bet as any. Um, but he's just not healthy. So he's someone that I would have on my roster, but I wouldn't count on. And if you happen to get a full season of Pete Fairbanks, you're super lucky, right? He could he could literally make your bullpen this year if he stays healthy.
He could. He could. He definitely has that ability. My
Mm-hmm.
super, super, super dark horse, shout out to 2020. Remember Nick Anderson?
Yeah, I saw you picked
If
him
you
up. The
if
Braves
if
on the
you're
Braves
if
now.
you're if you're
Fully.
right if you're right that Razel Iglesias stinks and is hurt, I would not be surprised if Nick Anderson is the closer at the end of the
He's
year.
got dominant stuff.
He's
Very good.
looking like himself again. 14 strikeouts, one walk in spring.
He's very good.
I think he's better than Jimenez. Snitker loves his linear bullpen. That could be it could be something to see, or it could be, as you said, barbecue arm.
Barbecue chicken. So
uh,
one guy I'm gonna mention just because
yeah, you got to give me one.
Jeremiah Estrada.
There you go. You
There's
and
a deep
Eno.
sleeper.
You
So
and Eno.
Jeremiah Estrada, let me just read you his K rates from so 17 was rookie ball. He didn't pitch in 18, 19, and then he didn't pitch in 20. So I've got this is not per year, but per league. 20.7%. Okay, not good. 33.3%, 40.9%, 42.9%, 35.1%, 48%, and 32% last year in Chicago. He is gnarly. So 97-mile-an-hour fastball, 94 or 84-mile-an-hour slider. But just tremendous, tremendous swing and miss. All throughout the minor leagues. He's someone that I will keep an eye on, especially in that Cubs bullpen where you don't really have anyone who's dominant, right? Um, you don't have the guy. Henry Rodriguez was supposed to be that guy, but you look at their team. I think it was Henry Rodriguez, but you look at that team and you just there's nobody that sticks out to you. And Estrada is the one whose stuff sticks out to me like a sore thumb. I love him. I think he's someone to keep an eye on. And if Adbert Alzolay doesn't take over that closer role, I think eventually Estrada might. There's your Manuel Rodriguez, excuse me. There's your Henry Rodriguez was the left-handed prospect for the Expos a long time ago. First base, corner, outfield, and the Dodgers. All right. I think that's enough randomness for tonight. Any other reliever talk?
No, no, I think that's good. I think it's a good way to close it out.
Okay. Do you have open forum? Anything interesting you wanna bring forward?
Um, I'll ask you one open forum question. Why in the hell did you pick up Ryan Tepera?
Why?
Yeah, why would you do that?
Because I think that in a holds league,
Yeah,
they
but you're like on record that you hate the Angels and that they're terrible. Why would you?
because I don't even pay. I
I
don't pay because a middle reliever I don't pay attention to. I had
all
Luis
right.
Rengifo last year too, right? Like I do hate them.
Yeah,
I hate the Rangers.
yeah.
I guess I'm becoming less. I am connected to the Mariners in the same way. I'm becoming less biased when I look at now when I pick up an Ohio State football player in fantasy football, then we're gonna have issues. But I think with Tapera, I've always felt like holds are important in our league, but it's a position where if I feel like my other stats, my ratios and my strikeouts are in line, I can afford to have one or two relievers who I roster because of role and not necessarily because of stuff, right? I also think that I don't know if last year was a bump in the road for him or if that decline was real, but his 21, if I'm not mistaken, was pretty phenomenal. And so it's not as if he hasn't performed at an incredibly high level in the past. Let me bring him up really quickly. But for me, it was holds. I was looking at the list and I needed holds, and I decided he was going to be my guy. I also traded him for like a fifth round pick or something last year. So there's someone else in our league who likes him, who I can potentially trade him to down the line. Uh, so
Oh man.
last year, here's some, I'm looking at some of the things that drove me to pick him up. So he had a 68.3% left on base rate, which is incredibly low. That's one thing where I feel like there's room to improve. What else? Of course, his K minus BB was 11.6%, but the previous 2 years they were 21.3 and 22.9% K minus BB. So the ability was there in the past. He also his velocity was still the same as it was previously. So he was executing his pitches, in my opinion, not nearly as well as he had. So his swinging strike rate in 2020 was 19.5%, and in 21 it was 16.3%. So he had elite swinging strike previously as well. And last year he had 17 holds and 6 saves. And we're in a league where holds and saves are their own categories. So were there better relievers to pick up? Sure. Could I picked up like Trevor Gott or Matt Festa on the Mariners and gotten better ratios and strikeouts? Probably. But I was looking for holds when I picked him up. There's your answer.
No.
Will I keep him and not cut him and
No.
pick up another guy pretty soon? Probably will pick up the next guy who gets cut, who I think is good. The one I had my eye on was Colin McHugh, and he got picked up. There's the other reason. So I was sitting on Liam Hendriks, waiting for Liam Hendriks to go on the disabled list. So, sorry, the injured list. And it took them forever. And I was pissed. So I did not get the guys that I wanted. So the other guys that I looked at, if you just filter for or search for highest projected holds, Tyler Rogers, James Nailey, Aaron Loop, your boy Adam Simber. I know you love him. Tim
I do
Mayvell.
not. I do not.
That was probably your version of Ryan Tepera last year. My point is
He
that
plays.
a lot of these guys aren't great, right? They all come with warts. They all have Dylan Coleman, Ryan Stanek, Will Crowe, Zach Jackson, Dylan Tate, Ryan Brazier, Brandon Hughes. I like Brandon Hughes, but he's hurt. Sam Moll, Jake Diekman, Carl Edwards Jr. Like they all have reasons to not roster them, right? I could
What are you looking at? Last year's holds?
no, I'm projected holds for this year.
Projected holds for this year, which are based on last year's. Okay.
Not totally, but what I do is I look at that, but then I start thinking about what I know about their skills and what I know about their role. So it's not simply that. It's, I know Matt Whistler has a great slider. He's on the Tigers. He's probably not going to hold that many games, right? I go down this list. Could I take a chance on Hunter Harvey? Sure. I like his stuff a lot. Are they going to win any games? Probably not. Phil Maton, I know what he is. He's going to get me 12 to 15 holds and have a 1.2 whip and pitch for the Astros, right? Eli Morgan, great changeup, nice fastball, no real breaking ball to speak of. So they all have warts. It's more to me a matter of finding the guy who you think is actually going to be in that role, is ascending to that role in a way that others don't see quite yet, right? Jose Quijada is someone I considered, because he's a lefty who tend to get more opportunities, and I think he has really good stuff. So, but they're all same. So when I'm looking at these guys and they're same to me, give me the guy who I think isn't going to kill me, who has track record of being dominant in the past, who's going to be seen by his manager as their eighth inning guy. To me, that's Tepera. Now that we spent
All
5 minutes on why I picked
I
up.
say 5 minutes we can't get back.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, you know
I
what?
just I just want to give you like a little nudge
Rather
and
Ryan
off you went.
Tepera than Harrison Bader. Okay, let's just say that. You got anything else?
No.
I have a question for you. How is your baseball viewing and baseball, I guess it's called baseball time, right? Time invested, going with your new schedule?
You know, it's definitely evolving. As I mentioned, I'm doing a lot of rewatching in the mornings, and I'm really enjoying that. And I think that's, to me, one of the things that's comforting and attaching about baseball is it's every day. It's kind of there when you, not say that when you need it, but it's the pacing, and it's the daily game. There's a rhythm to it. You know, last year I was working nights right now, so I saw most all of the West Coast games, if not in live, pretty much in real time.
Right,
Whereas the games that started during the day, when you guys would be texting about the day games, I was asleep,
right,
and it was a challenge to manage my lineups and stuff like that at times. And, now I have different challenges, but it's like the game is still there for you.
yep,
And the days when I'm on a stretch now where I work like 10 and 11 days in a row, but that's temporary. That's not going to be like that all the time.
right,
I want to have a couple days off and be able to get the grid going and really consume in real time.
right.
It'll make those days more special, but yeah, I think on a day-to-day basis, it's rewatching, re-listening early in the mornings of the games from the prior night and just getting as much enjoyment out of that. I think what I've yet to figure out that I need to figure out is like where I'm gonna do like my game reviews. Just something I got a lot of value. I try to spend like an
Right,
hour every day just going through
right,
and like looking at my players at bats, and like right now I don't have space for that to sit down
right,
and do that.
right.
It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's probably gonna have to exist in a more condensed fashion.
Sure.
In terms of me consuming games every day, I'm doing that, but it's just in the mornings, and it's been really comforting because when I roast, I have to have something in my ears to protect my ears anyway.
Mm,
And so having a game on, while I'm roasting is completely reasonable and makes it really enjoyable. So
that's awesome.
um,
I,
that's the way it's kind of pacing out so far, but I still have some work to do. I mean, I'm in a period of adjustment, honestly.
right. I ask in part because I'm moving to starting tomorrow. I'll be starting at 11 instead of 2. So it's like 11 to 7, which is amazing as a Mariners fan. It means most Mariners games I can watch. But I'm also giving up a couple of hours in the front end where I do spend time writing and
Yeah,
watching and reading, and so it'll be a matter of how to fit a lot of that in. Um, but I was just interested because I know we're both kind of shifting our schedules quite a bit and how that impacts, because it is outside of family, it is priority one, right? I think for both of us is our baseball consumption. Um, yeah, interesting stuff. It's just I kind of on a it's so fun to talk about. I'm just on such a high that baseball's back, and spring training was so much fun, and now we've got numbers to dig into, and a lot of it is the routine, right? It's craving the opportunity to create routine around baseball consumption. And it's such a huge part of so many of our lives. But cool stuff.
yeah.
Cool.
Well, I appreciate you taking my suggestion on RPs tonight.
Yeah,
It was some decent content. I enjoy this part of our game quite a bit, and like I have 11 guys on my watch list, and you didn't name any of them, but I'm just a crazy idiot who likes to like look at this stuff. So I hope it was somewhat interesting. And I appreciate you taking it on with me, and great talking at NFBC as well. It really helped me.
sweet.
I'm pleased with our results. So, all
I
right, have a good night.
You too, bro. Just so you
Be
know,
well.
I do have tons of guys on my watch list as well. I just did not have
Good,
to name them tonight. So
good. Me either.
all right, brother.
Bye.
All right.